All right, future civil servants, welcome back for another deep dive into the daily news you need for your UPSC exams. Today is January 12th, 2025, and we've got a lot to cover.
That's right. We're going to break down those complex current events into the key insights that can really set you apart. No fluff, just the good stuff.
Exactly. So let's dive right in. One of the things we've been looking at is this new tool INTERPOL is using, the Silver Notice. It seems pretty important.
Yeah, it is. It's all about following the money. Red notices, those are for catching individuals, but silver notices, they help track down all the assets criminals try to hide.
So think luxury cars, hidden bank accounts, fancy properties overseas, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Anything that helps dismantle these big criminal networks. And what's really interesting for us in India, we're one of the first 52 countries piloting this program.
Oh, wow. That's a big deal.
It is. It really shows India is getting serious about international cooperation when it comes to law enforcement, especially with transnational crime.
Yeah, and that's something that comes up a lot in the UPSC exams. It's not just about knowing the Silver Notice exists, it's about understanding what it means for India on the global stage.
Absolutely. Now, switching gears a bit, let's talk healthcare. India just performed 2 world-first robotic telesurgeries.
Okay, I've heard of robotic surgery, but telesurgery sounds pretty futuristic to me.
It does, doesn't it? But it's happening right now in India using this system called the SSI Mantra. Basically, a surgeon can operate remotely, controlling these robotic arms with almost zero lag time.
Wow, that's incredible. So what does this mean for India, especially with so many people in rural areas?
Well, think about it. This tech has the potential to completely change healthcare in India, providing specialized care to remote villages, reducing the gap in healthcare access. It could even be used to train surgeons in different locations.
That's amazing. It really shows how much India is pushing the boundaries in medical technology.
It does.
Mhm.
Now, let's move from high-tech surgery to something else crucial for India, our waterways. One of our sources today talked about the National River Traffic and Navigation System.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. It's all about making our rivers easier to use for transport, right?
Right. It's not just about making new waterways, it's about making the whole system safer and more efficient. Less congestion on the roads and railways, lower transportation costs. It could even boost trade and the economy.
So it's like a triple win. Good for the environment, good for the economy, and good for people.
Exactly. It's all about sustainable development. And speaking of development, let's talk about a big piece of news. One of our sources said India's poverty rate has dropped below 5% in 2024.
That's fantastic news. A huge achievement, right?
Absolutely. But, whenever we talk about poverty, there's always a lot going on under the surface. It's really important to understand how poverty is measured and all the factors that might be driving this decline.
I see what you mean. It reminds me of all those discussions about the Kandilkar and Rangarajan committees. They had those different ways of measuring poverty.
Right. And understanding those differences is super important for the UPSC exam.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just about taking the headline at face value. We need to dig deeper.
For sure. You got to ask those questions,
Yeah,
Has poverty really decreased in every region for all social groups? What role have government policies played?
makes sense. So we're connecting this news to the broader socioeconomic landscape and thinking about how it impacts different parts of India.
Exactly. Okay, now let's go from internal issues to something that's happening globally. One of our sources talked about those massive wildfires in California.
Yeah, those images were just heartbreaking. But are they really just natural disasters? Or is there something more going on there?
Well, dry weather and strong winds, yeah, they play a role, but there's no question that human activity and climate change are making things much worse.
Like deforestation and, all that development. Plus, the whole planet is getting hotter.
Exactly. It all adds up to a perfect storm for these fires.
So it's not just a California problem. It's connected to bigger global issues that affect India, too.
Absolutely. Think about all the environmental challenges India faces. Climate change, deforestation, unsustainable development. Those California wildfires are like a warning sign for what could happen if we don't get serious about these problems.
It makes you realize just how connected we all are. Okay, before we wrap up this first part, let's cover a few more news items that might show up on your UPSC exam.
Let's do it. First up, India just launched its 6th Scorpene submarine, the Vagsheer.
Right, I remember hearing about that. What's so special about these submarines?
Well, this one, like the others, has something called the Air-Independent Propulsion System. Basically, it means they can stay underwater for a much longer time.
That's a pretty big advantage.
Yeah, it's a huge boost for India's naval power. And on the economic front, one of our sources mentioned something called the interest coverage ratio. It's at a 30-year high right now for unlisted companies in India.
So that means companies are in a good position to pay off their debts.
It's a good sign for the overall economy, but we got to remember it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. We need to look at the big picture. Okay, what about technology? Anything exciting happening there?
Definitely. One of our sources talked about this new thing called conductive ink. You can print circuits directly onto surfaces, so you can imagine the possibilities.
Conductive ink. Sounds cool. Like, what kind of things can you make with that?
All sorts of stuff. Think about foldable screens, wearable devices, even super efficient solar panels.
Wow. So nanotechnology is really changing the game. What about new discoveries? Anything happening in space?
Oh, yeah. Astronomers just found over 44 new stars using a technique called gravitational lensing, where massive objects bend light and act like a giant magnifying glass.
Yeah, I remember learning about that. It's
Yeah, right.
mind-boggling. Think about all the things we're still discovering out there.
It is. Okay, last one for now. India just sent humanitarian aid to Cuba after Hurricane Raphael hit.
It's good to see India helping out on the world stage.
It shows India's commitment to being a responsible global power. All right, before we move on to our rapid fire round, let's take a minute to digest all this.
Yeah, good idea. We've covered a lot of ground here. Lots to think about.
Exactly. And we'll be back in a few minutes to continue our deep dive. Okay, so ready for round 2 of our UPSC Current Affairs deep dive.
Hit me with it. I'm all ears.
All right, so remember we talked about India sending aid to Cuba. That's a good example of India becoming a bigger player on the world stage.
Right. Not just aid, but things like that Silver Notice program with INTERPOL.
Yeah.
Really stepping up.
Exactly. It's like India saying, hey, we're here and we're ready to take on a leadership role.
Got it.
Yeah.
So what else is on the agenda?
Well, let's jump into the tech world for a minute. One of our sources was talking about this cool new technology called nano-bubbles. Apparently, they're amazing for cleaning water.
Nano-bubbles. Okay, you've got my attention. What are those?
Imagine these super tiny bubbles, like a ridiculously small. And because they're so small, they can actually grab onto pollutants and get rid of them way better than our normal methods.
So it's like a super-powered water purifier.
Pretty much. And for India, with all our water issues, this could be a game changer.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
It's amazing how technology can help solve these really big problems.
It is, right. And speaking of game changers, remember that conductive ink we talked about earlier? That's another one with tons of potential. Foldable phones, better solar panels, you name it.
So it's not just about those individual inventions. It's about seeing how nanotechnology is going to revolutionize so many different fields.
Exactly. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Remember those California wildfires? Tragic, right? But they actually have some important lessons for India.
Yeah, it's like a wake-up call about climate change and how we're treating the environment.
Exactly. Yeah, it might seem far away, but think about it. Deforestation, those crazy heat waves, these unpredictable weather patterns, it's all happening here in India too.
It makes you realize we're all connected, and what happens in one part of the world can affect us all.
Absolutely. Okay, now for a little history lesson. Did you hear about that incredible discovery in India? They found this ancient mud brick stadium at a place called Rakhigarhi.
Wait, a stadium? Like from thousands of years ago?
Yep. Turns out it dates back to the Harappan civilization. And get this, it even had a seating area and a slope so people could see better.
So they were into sports and entertainment way back then, just like us.
It seems like it. It's crazy to think about, right? These ancient civilizations weren't so different from us in some ways.
It just shows you how much history there is still waiting to be discovered. And speaking of the future, what about the UN's economic outlook for 2025? What's the verdict?
Well, the good news is they're predicting moderate global growth, but there are definitely some challenges ahead, like, those trade wars, all that debt countries are racking up, and all the political uncertainty in the world.
So basically, we need to be prepared for both good times and bad times.
Exactly. The key is to understand those global trends and how they could impact India.
All right, so we've talked about global issues, cutting-edge tech, and even ancient history. It's been a wild ride.
It has, and that's the beauty of current affairs, right? There's always something new and exciting to learn. And remember, all of this is connected to your UPSC preparation.
I know, right? It really makes you think about how all these different pieces fit together. Like, we've been talking about poverty in India, but they were also hearing about the global economy and how things like trade wars can impact us. It's all connected.
It is, and that's what's so important for UPSC aspirants to grasp. It's not just about memorizing facts, it's about making those connections, understanding the big picture.
Exactly. So it's not enough to just know about the Silver Notice. You need to understand how it fits into India's overall strategy for tackling international crime. Or, how those amazing robotic surgeries could help solve some of our healthcare challenges.
Exactly. You got to think about those things. How does India's poverty reduction plan connect to its economic growth? How are things like robotic surgery and those nano-bubbles actually addressing real problems in India? And what about India's foreign policy? How are those decisions shaping our role in the world?
It's like taking all these individual puzzle pieces and putting them together to see the whole picture.
Exactly. And that's the kind of thinking that will really help you stand out in those UPSC exams.
So for everyone out there studying hard for the UPSC, remember, stay curious, keep asking those questions, and connect those dots.
Absolutely. And don't forget to join us tomorrow for another deep dive into the current affairs you need to know.
And if you found this deep dive helpful, please like, subscribe, and share it with your fellow UPSC aspirants. We'll see you back here tomorrow.